President Trump has been denouncing the Robert Mueller investigation for many months now. But this week he caused a bit of a media explosion by ratcheting up his rhetoric with a tweet aimed at the one official who has recused himself from the Russia probe. This is a terrible situation, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions should stop this rigged witch hunt right now before it continues to stain our country any further. Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist and a Fox News contributor. Jillian Turner, a Fox News correspondent and former national security official in the last two administrations. And Caprica Faro, a Washington Examiner contributor and former Democratic Senate leader in Ohio. Molly, even if we accept the White House argument that the president is just offering his opinion, he's suggesting that his attorney general blow off the fact that he recused himself for ethical reasons. So is the media storm around this justified? It's
certainly good to talk about this issue, but I do think we need to have media people who understand how Donald Trump speaks. It's understandable that 2 years ago they didn't quite understand his rhetoric, but now after 2 years of seeing him speak in public, seeing his tweets, you would expect them to understand him a little bit better. He is expressing a great deal of frustration with a probe that has sidelined his administration for a year and a half, and he is the only person who seems to be talking about it, where everyone else in Washington, D.C. is pretending like it's okay that what's going on. Everyone else not just being politicians, but people in the media who are not holding Mueller himself accountable. They think their job is to cheerlead for him instead of to ask questions such as, what is the scope of his probe? Why has he not cared about the Hillary Clinton campaign's involvement with Russia? Why has he not found any evidence of collusion with the Trump campaign, which is the thing that we were promised by the media? So we're not seeing good media coverage, and we're not seeing good media understanding of how Donald Trump speaks.
But, Jillian, for a president who is constantly now complaining about the witch hunt and the unfairness of the Russia probe and it's a hoax and all of that, doesn't he create a tidal wave of coverage about the very story he hates every time he does one of these tweets, and particularly this one invoking Sessions?
Well, Howie, there's this old adage, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's something along the lines of no coverage is bad coverage, or
all publicity
bad
is good publicity.
Coverage is better than no coverage.
Yeah.
I think President Donald Trump is definitely an adherent to that rule.
But he can be covered on every single subject under the sun, and he keeps coming back to the Mueller alleged witch hunt.
And this is one of the things where I think the media is doing a really great job. The mainstream fake news media writ large is doing a great job of often pointing out to the president, hey, why do you ever tweet about anything other than the economy? Why do you ever tweet last week about anything other than 4.1% GDP? It seems you're derailing your own agenda. You don't need to create. You're already the most widely covered president in the history of this country. You don't actually have to create more news.
The underlying issue with the Mueller probe is one that's actually favorable to Donald Trump. So again, we were promised that we would find treasonous collusion with Russia to steal an election. To say we haven't found that is a huge understatement. I think he likes reminding people of that.
All right.
Well, okay, but we were promised by the media, as you mentioned earlier.
Yet.
Let me just
we
jump
have to
in
wait till the findings are released before we
But that's what people
decide.
say. We need to wait. And yet, how long do we have to have an administration be sidelined? I think he's asking very good questions, and the media should be discussing them as well.
And they don't necessarily need to be sidelined. I mean, just because that's what the media narrative is doesn't mean that they shouldn't continue to do the work that they're doing.
All right, I want to ask you this question, but first I want to tell our viewers that I interviewed Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, this week, and he told me it was just opinion, no presidential order. But I asked him, well, he named Sessions, and Rudy Giuliani said that he was talking about the generic Justice Department, and of course it would have to be his deputy Rod Rosenstein who would shut down a Mueller probe. Are the media buying the notion that these tweets are just opinion and that he's just venting when he has used tweets to announce policy?
I think that there has been a lot of scrutiny on this, as we were talking a little bit earlier. I think that on one hand, there are some in the media that understand sort of the nuances of Donald Trump, that, you know, he does get frustrated. He takes to Twitter. He sees something. He reacts. And that's not necessarily policy or meaning anything. But because of the nature of this, because there's all this discussion surrounding obstruction of justice and the fact that he is the president of the United States, as we saw in that clip from CNN with Cuomo, that, you know, he's not you, he's not me, he's president of the United States. And what he says and when he uses his words, they matter.
All right, we can all agree he's not you or me or anybody else. So the Paul Manafort trial taking place across the river in Alexandria is getting ample coverage, of course, given he's the former campaign chairman. But, Molly, it's about alleged bank fraud and tax evasion. It pretty much has nothing to do with Donald Trump or the campaign.
I think this is a prime example of what we were just talking about. So everyone's interested in this trial as part of this collusion theory with Russia. But the prosecutors have said they make no plans to bring up Russia or anything related to Donald Trump as part of the trial. That should cause some pretty good questions in the media about why the special counsel is handling this, whether this guy, who may or may not be guilty or shady, is also the victim of a political prosecution. But we're not seeing anyone actually asking any of these difficult questions of the Mueller probe. They just seem to trust it implicitly.
But again, Jillian, the president takes to the Twitter and he says, who was treated worse? Al Capone, legendary mob boss, killer, public enemy number one, or Paul Manafort, who worked for Reagan and Dole, who I barely knew, and again, driving attention to a trial that already was being covered, but maybe not being covered, constantly.
I think that was an instant classic Trump tweet this morning, in the sense that the president loves to do these sliding scale, everything's comparative, everything is subjective kind of tweets about people that get wrapped up in the probe. The first thing he did when it was first announced that Mueller was that Manafort was indicted, was he was kind of accosted by a gaggle outside of the West Wing, and he said, "Oh, well, what Paul Manafort has done is not nearly as bad as what other people have done, like Hillary Clinton." This is the thing that he likes to do.
This is a great example, though. If you are actually trying to investigate collusion with Russia to steal an election, should you not be asking some questions of Hillary Clinton, who secretly had a British spy get sourcing from the Kremlin to inject into the last election, weaponize it with the intelligence agencies, disseminate it to the media?
Can we go back to the actual Manafort trial?
Yeah.
If we can just go back to the Manafort trial for a minute, because it really doesn't have anything to do with Russian collusion.
Right.
And I think one of the things that Trump has put in his tweets is, this basically he's trying to get out there that a lot of basically everything that is in this trial predates Manafort's relationship with the Trump campaign. So I think that he's trying to get that out there, and that is not necessarily getting covered. One thing that I do find interesting is how popular culture has latched onto this Paul Manafort trial. Everything. Vox actually did an entire thing breaking down the Al Capone tweet. Then you see Esquire talking about it, Glamour magazine.
$15,000 ostrich coat.
Exactly.
The lavish lifestyle. I want to turn now to the president. Last night, he's held a number of rallies in recent days. This one in Ohio. What do you have to say about certain cable news networks? Roll it.
MSNBC is so corrupt. It's so disgusting. So disgusting. The guys that we love, right? They're blowing them away in the ratings. Hannity, Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, Steve Doocy, Ainsley, Ryan.
So back to you, Capri. Sure. Calls MSNBC corrupt. That's a word I haven't heard before. And I'm not sure it helps Fox when he praises the opinion host like that, because it suggests the entire network is alive with him. And that's not true, certainly, of the news division, but certainly the president rooting for some of his favorite hosts.
Sure, I think that it just continues that narrative that there is a preferred network, that may have a specific bias, and everyone else is fake news. I do want to point out, I actually just saw this right before we went on air, that there was just a recent survey of 4,000 viewers that actually, interestingly enough, show Fox News as number 2 as the most trusted news by most American viewers that were surveyed. Number 1 was BBC, number 3 was PBS. So I think that says something about the viewers and how America sees MSNBC and CNN as well.
The president is now attacking the press, I would say, virtually every day. And he used the word disgusting at a Pennsylvania rally. And this morning he tweeted, they purposely cause great division and distrust. They also cause war. They are very dangerous and sick. Is that over the top? Also cause war? Well,
this is why I think the best way to hold Donald Trump accountable as a media organization is just to cover him straight. Because when you behave in such a clownish fashion, as so many people are, where they're just open and honest about how much they view their job as resisting him, it gives him the ammunition he needs. He's not going to back down any sooner than they back down. They're in a dysfunctional relationship. They both like to go after each other, and it's a talking point that resonates with the American people, because a recent poll showed, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, 72% of Americans believe that the media regularly put out fake, false, and misleading information, that they do it to pursue an agenda, which is obvious because every time they make a mistake, it breaks in the anti-Trump direction. So this is going to continue until such time as the media take their jobs more seriously and start just covering him straight.
Well, I would say Trump's attacks resonate with some of the American people. And just briefly, Jillian, so Ivanka Trump was interviewed by Axios, and she said that, well, she didn't like some of the inaccurate reporting about her. I do not feel the media is the enemy of the American people. She sort of broke with her father. Trump then tweeted about it, President Trump. She correctly said, no, it's the fake news that is the enemy of the American people. But he defines that as including New York Times, Washington Post, ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN.
Well, and there's a reason that the president gets pushback on those kinds of comments from the left and from the mainstream fake news media, as he likes to call it, and not from Republicans, lawmakers on Capitol Hill, other government officials. It's because I think a lot of this comes from the idea that the president is expressing a frustration Republicans have widely had since the Reagan administration, and have not been able to verbalize in quite the manner.